So we have seen how to use the context to refer back to what happened before in the conversation. And the way we did that is we set a context called planet hyphen attribute hyphen set in the user asks for attribute of planet intent, and then we used that as the input context for the other intent, like the next intent which we expect that the user might have a follow-up question for when they say like and its radius or what is its radius and so on. And there we use the input context of the we used the planet hyphen attribute hyphen set as the input context of that intent. Now you might remember that I also added it as the output context again. Now even without having this output context, I could have done this. I could have used the syntax and gotten the value of the previous step in the conversation and it would have worked. So why did I set this output context over here? Now the reason I did that is, what if the user wants to ask one more attribute? That means we might want to, let's say that after they ask what is the color of Venus, and then they ask what is its radius, and they might be saying like, and what is its volume, right? That for that you have to persist the context value as well, and the way to do that is to use the same context over here. This is a bit, you can say this is a little advanced, so I'm going to show you the example and like show you how it works, and that would actually make it a little easier for you to follow. So let's start with the basic one. Let's say, what is the color of let's say Neptune? And it comes back with, you ask for the color of Neptune and what is its radius. You can see that it says you ask for radius of Neptune, but you can see that it's continuing with the same context. So now if I say, and what is its volume? So you can see it's, since we extended that attribute, and that is we extended that context, it still contains the old value of Neptune in its name. So because I'm using the same context name, I'm able to continuously refer back to what happened. In fact, if you think about it, in this case, it's something which happened a couple of steps before in the conversation, right? Now if I ask, and what is its color, again, it's going to say you asked for the color of Neptune. It's being able to do all this because we take a context and we use it to persist values from previous steps in the conversation, and as long as we keep the context active, and by active what I mean is I have this lifespan, that lifespan keeps decrementing per step in the conversation, and in fact if I had not set the lifespan to 1 here, if I just left the output context here empty, at that point this context would have expired and it would not have been active once it came back with this reply. And by recreating it as the output context here and giving it a lifespan of 1, what I have done is extended the lifespan of the planet hyphen attribute hyphen set context by 1 more step. Okay, so now we can use the same idea to create another intent, and in this case we will change the planet instead of changing the attribute. So you should do the same thing. You start with planet hyphen attribute hyphen set as the input context, change the context lifespan to 1 here, and here the training phrase would be, what about let's say Earth. So the understanding here is that they had already asked the attribute of a planet, and they are asking for the value of the attribute for a different planet in this case, right? So you do the same thing here too. You say you asked for the, and okay, of course what changes here is now you have to refer to the attribute by using the context variable as we had done before, right? And then of $planet. So when you think about it, this is how you do it in this case, because here the uh, entity that is getting extracted is the name of the planet, and what we got from the context is the attribute they had asked for in the previous step, right? So now let's try this. What is the color of Saturn? It says what you asked for the color of Saturn. Then if you say what about Jupiter, you can see that it says you asked for the color of Jupiter. Now if you say and what is its radius, so you can see that at the moment the planet which is held in the context is the last one we refer to. And well, by the way, that's something that you should know. If you are using that same name, it's going to keep overwriting that with the whatever the latest value that it extracted. So here it is saying you asked for the radius for Jupiter, which is again what we expect. So this is the basic idea of context, and I will say that the topic of context is pretty complex, and you can say it's also very deep because you can do a lot of things using this idea of context. Now, the simplest way to think about it is to, like I said at the start of the video, it is a way to keep track of what has happened in the conversation till now, and you can use the context to extrapolate the values that the user is intending. In this case, for example, what we did is, as soon as the user typed in what is the color of Saturn, let's say, we know that they have asked for an attribute called color and a planet called Saturn. And if they were to change that to and what is its radius, we can use the fact that they have previously referred to the planet Saturn to be able to infer in the next step that they are still talking about Saturn. That's exactly what we did when we created this intent call user changes attribute, because here we only provide the attribute name in the training phrase, and we don't have any reference to the planet in the training phrase, but we are still able to understand which planet the user is asking for based on what happened in the previous step in the conversation. And we are able to do that because we are using this concept of context. Now, one thing that you have to understand, and of course this is very important, is that the context name that you declare here, it should exactly match the context name that you declare as the input in the next step. Okay, so that's the most important thing, and that's kind of what makes the whole thing work. So that's an introduction to how contexts work. And if you are still not clear about how it works and what exactly you can do with context and all that, what I suggest is you should just use what you've learned till now and build out a few of these intents which follow something which is quite similar in pattern to what I've already shown. And I think that over time you'll get a much better understanding of how contexts work.